Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's program. For those of you attending your first program at the Exec Club, my name is Margaret Mueller, and I'm the President and CEO of the Executives Club of Chicago. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors for the upcoming season. Also, the presenting sponsor of today's program, KPMG, and spotlight sponsor, the Cubs. It's been an exciting season at the club so far, and we hope you'll join us again before 2021 comes to a close. We have a few things coming up. On December 15th, I'll be in conversation with Matthew Barzin, founder of CNET, National Finance Chair for Barack Obama, and ambassador to both Sweden and the UK, and author of The Power of Giving Away Power. We're going to have a hybrid event at the American Writers Museum. Also, we are thrilled to host our members-only annual holiday party in person on December 9th with a special guest appearance by world-renowned chef and philanthropist, Jose Andres. And as we head into the new year, I am very happy to announce that our annual economic outlook on January 13th will be in person with a virtual viewing option. So I look forward to seeing many familiar and new faces as we get back together again for this event. On to our program. I'm so pleased to be here with you all today to kick off our Chicago CEO series for the season. We brought this series back to the club's programming lineup last year to feature the bold leaders who call Chicago home. Today's conversation is with an incredible leader and one of the newest members of the Executives Club Board of Directors. We're excited to hear Tim and Linda in conversation together. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome Jonathan Hauser, KPMG tax partner, who will share a few words and introduce our speakers. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you for the introduction, Margaret. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Jonathan Hauser, and I'm a tax partner with KPMG. I would like to extend a special thanks to the Executives Club of Chicago for providing a platform for today's dialogue. In addition, I'd like to thank our esteemed speaker and our moderator for being with us. And thank you to everyone tuning in for this program. We're excited to have you with us. KPMG is proud to be the presenting sponsor of the Chicago CEO Series at Exec Club and its mission to amplify voices of the innovative leaders of our city. Today, I look forward to hearing from Tim Walbert, Chairman, President, and CEO of Horizon Therapeutics. Horizon's impressive footprint on research, development, and commercialization of medicines addressing rare autoimmune and severe inflammatory diseases is driving patient advocacy into the future. Horizon is recognized by patients in the community and employees alike for the company's motivation to elevate underserved communities who lack the necessary resources to thrive. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Tim Walbert, Chairman, President, and CEO of Horizon Therapeutics, and Linda Imonti, the Office Managing Principal for the Chicago office of KPMG, who will moderate today's conversation. Thank you all for joining us, and over to you, Linda.
Thanks, Jonathan. I want to kind of kick off first, and in chatting with you up to this session, I had an opportunity to really learn more about kind of your journey. And so I wanted to just start off kind of sharing that maybe with the group on, you took the CEO role in 2008, but before that and up to that point and past that, you have a whole history and journey around being the patient and the caregiver, and really kind of sharing with this group, how has that motivated you and how does that continue to motivate you on an ongoing basis in the role you're in and with the organization?
Sure. Well, thanks. And great to be here. Thank you, Margaret, as well. And being a patient is something, especially with autoimmune and a rare disease, it's a lifetime journey and one that I've experienced and had the fortune of working in an industry where I've taken many of the medicines that I've been involved with. And it's something that has always given me a different perspective, and it attracted to me to working in autoimmune diseases. I was involved in the development and launch of Humira and many other autoimmune or arthritis-related medicines. And it just gives you a different perspective. And as a leader of a company that is focused in the healthcare space, I think seeing things through a patient's eyes definitely changes how you run a business and how you bring expectations to the team and really understanding the journey a patient goes through. Because as much as we love the medicines that we make and sell, they may not be doing to the patient what we think they are. So we may think we have a medicine that makes a great difference for a patient, but in reality, it's helping but not changing a patient's life. So patients have many other things going on in their lives, and you have to have really a real context and understanding of what that patient goes through, not just how your medicine works in that patient. And then I had the unfortunate reality of having my son diagnosed with a rare and an autoimmune disease as well over the last year, and becoming a caregiver. And you assume you know what it's like for someone to have a child or a family member who has a rare or autoimmune disease, but to go through it and experience all the challenges in the healthcare system and getting medicines and getting into treatment, a whole new perspective that I think makes me better at what I do, and that it takes a lot of those assumptions away that you really have to factor in, especially with children, that their parents have to play, and caregivers of anyone who is sick have to play a key role in their treatment.
Yeah, and I think an interesting perspective to have been the patient yourself, but then as the caregiver, right, and the ongoing kind of role that you play and the knowledge you also have to gain as a caregiver. So if you hadn't gone through it yourself as a patient too, I think there's an understanding that could come to being a caregiver of those that haven't been through it already, yet they're a caregiver.
And you look at we're in rare diseases, and one assumes you find out what you have and you get treated and you find a pathway. Yet there's 7,000 rare diseases, and only about 350 to 400 of them actually have approved treatments. And I went through this myself when I was in my 20s. I saw over 100 different physicians, and I was always at the end of every visit or series of visits categorized as an interesting patient, which is code for we don't know what you have. And that is something that so many patients go through, even with a standard autoimmune disease like Humira treats in rheumatoid arthritis. And then you think to a rare disease that even your physician you're seeing may not understand your symptoms and may not be able to come up with a solution. That's a real challenge. And that's something that, fortunately, my son, I knew what he had, and I was able to get him to treatment, 10 years faster than I was myself. But to go through it yourself, you understand that it's not just about having a medicine, it's about helping people get diagnosed earlier so they can actually get on treatments or get a better diet or whatever is required to improve their lives.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about, the perseverance. So you came through that experience, and also during your time there leading the organization. Now you've transitioned to a caregiver also, but it takes a lot of perseverance to really build a company, especially in the life sciences space. So share with us some of the challenges you've really faced in growing Horizon.
Well, in any company, you go through a phase as a biotech company where you lose money. We lost money for the first probably 5 or 6 years. And we spent many weeks where we didn't know when the next paycheck or money was coming from. So we couldn't pay people. We had a situation in early 2010 where half of our employees, which was 8, stayed as contractors because we couldn't afford to make them employees until we actually raised more money. And we probably had 4 or 5 times we were out of money at the end of the week and didn't know when that next payment from an investor was actually going to hit our accounts. And you have to really see the big picture and continue to fight when getting medicines through the FDA, getting through the manufacturing process. We see so many stories today of medicines that prove their efficacy, yet they get rejected because you can't manufacture them effectively. There's so many aspects that go into bringing a medicine to market that you have to really see forward and understand that you want to actually bring these medicines forward to patients and continue to fight because most medicines take a lot longer to develop than you may have anticipated. It takes more money, and running a company always takes more money, more people, and more time. And you wind up in a situation where you have to make a lot of tough decisions and you're not able to do everything that maybe at bigger companies. I worked in pharma companies for 14, 15 years before running small companies. And a lot of things we take for granted in big companies are what we're desperate for, like having money. And big companies, how much of my budget, how many million can I get in my budget? Whereas when you're running a small company, it's how many 100,000 can I get? And you don't need to find someone to do most things. You actually have to do it yourself. So it's an entirely different dynamic. And you also need people that are going to have that shared purpose and be in it for the long run and understand that short term, there's going to be some real sacrifices. Our chief medical officer worked free for us for almost 2 years and just willing to help out and do whatever he could. And then ultimately came on board and has been with me through the entire journey.
Now, you also during that time built an entire R&D organization. You were talking about the process you go through with new medicines and getting things to market, and also a manufacturing facility. But can you talk a little bit about, in the R&D organization that you built, that enables you to do even more, kind of in the forefront and on the edge. Can you talk a little bit more about that for the group and the importance of that for you as a life sciences organization?
For us, the initial focus was just around driving commercial excellence and driving sales. In fact, third quarter, we had our first $1 billion sales quarter, and Tepezza recently launched medicine, hit $1 billion this year. So great commercial success, but the lifeblood of our industry is coming up with solutions. I remember picking my son up from practice one day and football practice, and I was driving him home, and he said, "Dad, are you ever going to come up with something to treat our disease?" And that's kind of one of those things that, you think you have all this success, you're helping patients, and your son, basically challenges you with something you don't have a solution for. And that's what R&D is all about, is finding solutions to unmet needs that there are no other solutions. Most rare diseases have no approved medicine, which means by definition, we're embarking on new grounds, which you need to have very creative trial designs. You have to have patients involved and hear the patient voice. But it is something that takes a lot of time. Medicines take anywhere from 8 to 15 years to get through the entire process of being identified and discovered, and then ultimately developed through phase 1, 2, and 3, and submitted to a regulatory agency in US or around the world. And then you have the whole manufacturing process, where if you're in biologics or certain therapeutic areas, a lot of cell therapies and gene therapies today, the manufacturing process is as complex as the development process of a medicine. And all of this, on average, there's various reports. Most R&D projects fail. I think somewhere in the 70+% of medicines that are actually started into human trials never actually make it to market. So when you look at all that cost of failure, has to be factored into the cost to develop a successful medicine. So on average, many of the reports that come out of Tufts and other areas show that anywhere from $2 to $3 billion is spent for every approved medicine to make it to market. So there's a lot of risk involved, and you have to be able to really adapt, change, and realize that when you're in rare diseases, you don't have clinical trial design that's been used in many other patients. So you have to take a lot of risk and find different ways to really get your medicine to work. So it brings tons of challenges, and it brings a lot more risk to what you're doing, and also to investors.
Yeah. You've said a couple different comments about this. You referenced, a team working together on the R&D, a team engaged and committed. You referenced shared purpose, which leads me back to kind of the Horizon really has a reputation for its culture. And part of that culture is that shared purpose. But share with us some of the things that have been put in place. What are the key ingredients? I mean, some I'm hearing is the history of how you were built and what everybody's been through together. And there's a shared kind of history and track you've all been through, a lot of you growing this organization. But what are the key ingredients to really a collaborative culture? And how do you maintain that culture? Because you also mentioned a great quarter you just came through. So you've got to maintain that culture too as you grow. So how have you managed to do both of those? And what ingredients do you think make those up for you?
Well, I think one, it's not easy. And as you grow, the thing people generally come to small companies for is to get away from bureaucracy and a lot of things that go into large companies and process and slowness, and they're looking for basically taking that all away and having a more free-flowing and enjoyable work experience. I think shared purpose is critical in that. I was just reading on, I think it was on LinkedIn yesterday or the day before, where 82% of Generation Z, it was a survey of 5,000 people, it said that purpose is the main reason they go to work. And I think if you look at the employee base and where we are today in a society where we talk about the Great Resignation and not being able to fill many jobs, whether that's labor jobs or business jobs, you have to compete for talent, and having a company that has real purpose matters to employees in a way that I don't think it ever has before. And for us, we are patient focused, and some examples are when it comes to working with patient advocacy groups. We are a small company. We've been growing, and just last year there was a survey done of all companies that work in rare disease or in autoimmune diseases, and looking at the advocacy organizations. And 2 years ago we weren't even in the survey, and last year we're in the survey, and across every measure, and that's against the Pfizers and Mercks and all the large companies, we are rated 1, if not 2, in every category. And a lot of that is, if you look at our advocacy organization, there's many people who are parents who have children with rare diseases. They're caregivers, or they're patients themselves. And they understand that when you work with patient advocacy organizations, it's not the money you give. Your time is as valuable as your money. And I think at Horizon, people really care about the patients. They are a patient, as I am, and they really do care about the outcome. And we have a medicine that we were studying for a rare neurologic disease probably 3-4 years ago, and it failed a phase 3 trial. And 4 years later, we're still working with that advocacy group as if it was successful, because people really care about patients who have that rare disease. So it's something where people really care about the diseases we're in, the patients that they interact with, and that's a really core tenet of people working here.
I like to look at the questions kind of as we're going that are coming in to see if they're relevant to certain topics. So I'm going to insert one here for you because I think it's really relevant to this topic, which is, how do you create an inclusive environment that embraces all employees and provides them the tools for success, regardless of personal limitations? And how do you train other leaders to embody the same values?
Well, that is, I think, a real challenge, but opportunity. If you look at most startup companies, everyone hires their friends or people they worked with and know, and you try to survive. And then as you grow, you get past your friends and you have to hire other people. And that's where you need to be broader and more diverse and more inclusive. And I think it's important to, first thing is being aware. I think unconsciously, many people will continue to do the same thing over and over, and having awareness of what's important. And just when it comes to interview slates, you have to make sure that you're working. And so many people say, well, you're not hiring a diverse talent pool. And they say, well, we're not getting the people that apply are the ones we hire. Well, no, you haven't done a good enough job of going and getting recruiters that represent various diverse groups. And I think it is also important to make sure that you're being fair. The last 2 years, we did a study on gender pay, on looking at fairness across, whether it's diversity, across gender, across our entire organization. And we found that women and minorities and other are paid equally for the same job worked as males or non-minorities. And that's something that a lot of companies aren't willing to actually do that work and share it. And it's really important. That's something right from the beginning. We always made sure if you come in at a level, it doesn't really matter what your background is relative to gender or race. It's what is the job you're doing, and you should be paid a similar amount. And that's been something that we consciously focused on from the beginning, versus having to be reminded that, hey, we now to look at it because it's important in the industry. Well, when we did the study, we knew what the results would be because we always treated people the right way from the beginning. And I think having that tenet of just do the right thing. And we have never had a program that says we want a certain percentage female. 70% of our R&D organization is female. That wasn't by design. That was how our organization hired that talent. So I think that when you have people that are given the freedom to hire the best people and not told to, you need to have this particular group, I think you have the right people and they'll get to the right place on their own. And we've got very good representation and gender diversity without having to force it on people, which means people are trained the right way. We're going to the right slates and making sure that we're getting access to the right diversity of people. I think the biggest challenge is if you keep looking in the same place, you'll keep getting the same people. And that's where sometimes it goes down the wrong path.
Yeah, one of the questions we just got in is, I think we just answered as we walked through that, but I want to make sure I address it for the audience, which is, what would you suggest to leaders who are looking for new ways to increase culture, sense of belonging, and purpose, and retain and motivate talent? And what are some of the leaders getting right and what are they getting wrong? And I think, Tim, you just outlined a number of things your organization has done in order to address that. But just so we make sure we address this question too, is there anything you want to add to that about what other organizations might miss or do wrong that gets them off, that you've learned over the years, like, oh, I need to go adjust that and let's go a different direction? Were there any learnings in your kind of DEI and your focus in that area?
Well, I think in a lot of areas, it's, you don't have to be big to do it. And I think corporate social responsibility also fits in this. A lot of companies say, well, we don't have enough money to get involved in supporting the community. Well, we went and had people give their time. We went down to Perspective Charter School, and one of them in Chicago that we worked with, and we painted a fence. The paint didn't cost a lot of money. It took people's time to go down there and paint, the whole schoolyard, the whole property, and go in and build a room. And I think there's ways that you can donate time, and also it's about listening to people. I think a lot of people come from large corporate environments that are very hierarchical, and they have expectations of what everyone in every one role, how it works. And I think you have to continue to break down those barriers and continue to do the right thing. And you shouldn't be doing the right thing just because it's someone who looks or feels or acts like you do, which means you have to empower and hold your teams accountable to do that. And I think that often by the time something happens, if a company or an individual is doing the wrong thing, everyone else knows it long before you've made that decision. So typically that's had a negative cultural impact. And I think it's all about raising awareness and focusing on it right from the beginning.
Yeah, I want to keep going a little bit with the employee thing, because I know one of the things that's so important to you and the organization as a whole is really making sure that regardless of tenure there, that you bring the whole group along with you in your success. Right. And that you really focus that it's for all when you are successful. Can you share a little bit about how you've done that and made sure that you're bringing the whole group along, right, through the success?
I think there are a number of things that you can do for everyone in your business. We have never excluded any group from getting equity. It doesn't matter if you are working in scheduling meetings, or if you're in R&D or at the lowest level, every person in the company is going to get equity and share in the success of the company. I'm on the board and been on the board of some companies and seen a lot of companies that say, well, you have to be at director level to get equity. Well, I just think you're excluding a key part of your organization that makes you successful. So areas that you can control, like equity, should be shared among everyone. If there's a bonus for executives, everyone should share in a bonus. So I think that those are some simple things that shouldn't be difficult to do, but people, tend to not think through it fully and say, well, I don't need to give it because they don't expect it. Well, that's not the reason you do it. When we first started building internationally, people came and said, well, they don't, in certain parts of Europe, they don't expect to get stock options or equity. So it's not an expectation there. And I said, well, it doesn't matter. That's what we do. So we give everyone, doesn't matter where in the world you are or what office you're in or what role you have, you're going to get equity, and we're not going to give you less just because you happen to live in Ireland or Germany versus the US where it's a standard practice. So I think that's something that shows people that, you're getting treated fairly, and it doesn't matter if your local market happens to be different. We want to treat you fairly across the world.
Yeah.
And another thing that we do is when it comes to giving back and corporate social responsibility, we have sales reps, people all over the country in various different countries around the world, and everyone cares about something different. So a number of years ago, we did two things. We basically said, if you want to give money, give to what you believe to be important, whatever group is. If you want to help the Arthritis Foundation, you want to help something, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Association, then do it and we'll match that. And the other thing we wanted is people to give their personal time in their community. So if you're a sales rep in Memphis, then go take a personal day. And everyone gets its personal day where you get a day off to go work in the community. And allowing people to do what's important to them, not what we tell them is important. So some of these things I think go a long way to really defining your purpose as an individual, how you want to give back, and trying to link that into what the company's purpose is.
Right. And volunteering and being out there and active in the community has become so much more important even today than it was 20 years ago for all of those who work in our organizations. Our focus is much more, it's kind of come up in that area where people want to give their time as much, if not more, right, than just their dollars. They want to be a part of the outcome, right? Not be distant or arm's length from the outcome. So that's changed a lot, I know, in our organization for our people, and I'm sure it has in yours.
And I think that you've seen a lot of this even around corporate governance and people debating what is the role of a company. We're a public company, and we can give you that talking point of, I'm here to represent shareholders, and I report to a board who represents those shareholders. But in reality, we're in a different world today where I'm responsible to making sure employees have the best experience. And we're in healthcare, and we talk about all the challenges of people in healthcare and getting access to healthcare. If we didn't have a really good healthcare plan for our employees, it'd be pretty hypocritical. So things like we've done is, for the last 3 years, even though the costs of our healthcare have increased, we've absorbed those costs. We don't charge employees any more money because, you have to work within the spirit of, we're in the healthcare industry. You have to try to give back and do those things. But I think the expectations of companies has definitely changed. We have to worry about and care more about our communities, our employees, the patients we represent, and shareholders. And I think that there's been a lot of talk about, what is even legally the obligation of a company. Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, has a large voice, given the scale of JP Morgan, has talked a lot about we need to change what's really written down in our mandates as an organization, to serve multiple different customers or people. And I think we're seeing that change. And as I mentioned earlier, if you look at Generation Z and millennials, it's just expected that not only will you do all these things, but you also have a voice. And we see so many social issues and civic issues and things going on, shootings in schools. What happened in Michigan on the other day is just terrible to go through a high school and 11 people shot and 4 passed away. It's devastating. And so we have to be able, as organizations, we used to sit there and just let it happen and not comment. And now the expectation as a leader of a company, you have to have a point of view. If there's an issue going on around unfair treatment of a certain race, there was issues against Asian Americans, Black Americans, companies are expected to stand up and fight for people that are represented within our own employee base.
Yeah, if we push that a little bit further, face outwards into the community, do you think that organizations today are doing enough in the communities around them? And how would you recommend that they build and grow more commitment and involvement in their local communities?
Well, I think that doing community-based work, corporate social responsibility, has generally been seen as a corporate function, and as you have money, you want to give back, and it's basically been a really good talking point. And I think we're in a world that expects it to be more than that it really is part of your purpose and your mission. And if we're here to help patients get better with our medicines, the communities we work are also have many of those patients. And I got a note mailed to me the other day. I opened up, someone actually wrote a letter, which was kind of shocking. I hadn't gotten one of those in a while, who drives by our office every day. And she said, well, I drive by your office every day. I just wanted to thank you for all the trees you planted. We planted 350 trees around our campus because we wanted to fit more into the natural environment. And she said, I now enjoy driving by here every day. So, a little thing, but she lives down the street and appreciated that, we actually did something that might improve, the area around her. So it means something different to everyone. But I think you have to understand, one of the things is people around it, we have signs up on the buildings, and people don't want to see bright lights all the time. So you turn your lights off and respect your neighbors. And there's just little things that you do that I think become important as you represent who you are as a company.
Yeah. As we look out into the communities, and I know that with some of my board roles I have and other roles I've done, and then with you and your role, we know that there is a set of communities out there that is underserved, right, by our industry as a whole in medicine. And I spoke about this a couple of years ago when I was chairing the Heart Ball. And it's so important that we start to shift and change that. Can you talk a little bit about how you have focused on the underserved communities and how maybe other organizations might begin to further advance their focus on the underserved communities?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is stand up and fight when they're either attacked or disadvantaged. And you have a lot of racism that's been going on in this country and in various terms. I was sitting with a person from Ireland, and talk about lack of awareness. This person was describing to me what racism meant between a person from Ireland versus a person in England. And what I thought was a joke around the heritage of Ireland was actually seen as racism by the Irish person versus the English person that in that dialogue. And it means different things to different people. But I think the lesson for me is we all have to have awareness of different people and different points of view. If you talk about Ireland and they had a potato, one thinks potatoes. And if you talk about that in a funny way and how challenged that country was, that's going to offend people, especially for the people in the UK who deprived them at a time where 1 million people died from a famine that existed. So it was a great lesson for me that, what racism looks and feels different to every different group and environment you're in. And, we should all have a responsibility to stand up and defend. And when the things happen in Minnesota or in other areas, we as a company had to take a stand and come out and go against, actions that, aren't about Black, white, or Asian or other. It's just about human decency. And I think that there's been a lot of anti-Asian activities that have occurred given with the pandemic. And, We had an employee that was being harassed in one of the local communities, and we stepped up and said, we'll pay for you to move to an area that you're more comfortable with. So I think you have to step up and try to help where you can, and not accept it. And I think companies, people used to talk about Chicago and Michael Jordan, and he had all his advertising and would never talk about a tough topic because maybe one of the advertisers wouldn't support it. Well, that's not acceptable. We have to have a strong point of view, and employees expect that of you.
Yeah, and I think we have to take things head on, right? We're no longer in a time where we can sit back and not take certain topics on head on that we used to drive around, right, as organizations. I agree with you 100%. I want to shift to some of the questions. There's some good questions that have come in. Some are going to kind of go over a little bit some of the things that we've already gone through, but one of the ones takes us back to the discussion in the very beginning around your personal story. And do you have a mentor or a certain breaking point that made you comfortable being transparent about your own personal experience?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I was 35 when I was willing to first share it. And up until that point, I always feared that it would be used against me. And the interesting thing about many autoimmune diseases is these are things going on. Your body's attacking itself. So until it gets really bad, like if you see a patient, an older patient with rheumatoid arthritis before medicines like Humira, their fingers and the disfiguring and deformity was very present. But in many people, you just can't see it, which means you can act and you can hide it. And I did that extremely well. And I guess I got to the point where I was running a large business and felt like, well, they can't use it against me now. And I can talk about it. We had a situation at a manager's meeting at the company I was at, and they said, well, talk about yourself. And I talked about it for the first time, and it was really fascinating. You never want to, when you have diseases, you never really want to talk about yourself, because most of these diseases that are autoimmune or chronic or rare diseases, there is no cure and it's not going away. So then you have to put yourself in a position to not be a victim and not be use that as how people think about you, because people get defined by diseases or someone. You look at these poor kids that went through this situation in Michigan, their lives are now defined by that trauma they went through. So as a patient with several autoimmune diseases, if I didn't take Humira, I wouldn't be able to work. I'd be on disability sitting at home. So you don't want to be defined by those situations, because 25 years ago, life would have been different for me. I have the benefit that something like Humira, I could actually develop it, and I've taken it for 18 years myself and been able to live a much different life than I would have otherwise.
Right. Do you feel that over the years too, as we've moved through the years, it's different today when we talk about things that might be different for each one of us as individuals?
Oh yeah,
work environment.
Well, I think that it's much more accepted, and I guess when you look at being part of any group that isn't normal, as we call it, your biggest fear is that everyone's going to look at you that way, and as society is becoming more accepting, it's easier. We have a corporate campaign that we rolled out about a month ago, and it's called the It's Personal campaign. It talks about me and my disease and dealing with that as a patient, but also as a parent and what my wife and I go through. But it's something that we have so many people within the company that have the same stories. So that campaign is not about me. It's about me as the first voice, but it's going to be followed by 20, 30, 40 other people who are going through the same situation I'm going through. We just haven't heard their voice yet, and trying to empower people to speak up, and maybe there's someone else out there that can help you in a different way.
It lets them start.
Yeah, you talk about things, a better chance you can actually get some help from it.
Yeah, it lets them start to open up and bring that part of themselves, right, also to the environment, which I think benefits us all in our organizations when people can bring their whole self.
Well,
right?
people make a lot of assumptions, and when you're transparent, not only about things within work, but who you are, I think it can change that environment, that you can have honest conversations with people that may not be easy, but they're authentic because you're not hiding who you are for me as a patient.
Right, agreed. Next question is talks about how you are often leading initiatives to support the community, which we chatted about, but specific reference to providing the seed funding to help launch Governor Pritzker's, I just lost it, COVID relief funds. And the question is really around why is support and support of social issues so important, which we covered. But I think maybe we could talk a little bit about, those specific decisions around COVID and maybe how the organization has worked through that and gotten through that.
Well, it's interesting in that, I've always looked at it simply as you try to do the right thing. I'll give an example. I was running a business. I'll save the company name, but we had a person, a sales representative, who got cancer, and I just told them, fly their family in and whatever it is, get them hotel rooms. And I got a lot of trouble at my company for doing that. And you shouldn't be able to spend that. There's programs to support them, and I didn't care. And that impacted me as a leader, not so positively. But I think that I didn't care. I would have paid for it myself. And we've had a situation here where, unfortunately, you get bigger, you have people pass away, and we go in and ask the family, what help do you need? We pay for their funerals. I don't care about what benefits and programs we have. You just step in and see what the family needs, and you just do it. And when it came to the pandemic, we took the same approach. March 16th, we're all sitting at home, and I texted JB Pritzker, who's the governor here, and said, hey, how can we get involved and help? And he said, hey, I'll put you in touch with my folks. And then we got on the phone and said, well, we don't really have a mechanism right now to just give a donation. And that he reached out to his sister and started a whole group and said, all right, let's put money into that and help them really get it started. And soon after that, many of the other local companies jumped into it, and it just needed that initial reach out. Didn't know what the heck to do, but just said, hey, how can we help? And at the time, JB just said, hey, let's figure it out. And John Conrad, who runs Illinois Bio locally, stepped up and said, well, I'll coordinate it across our industry. And it just kind of went from there. And I think sometimes you just have to reach out and say, I'm willing to help, and not have an answer. And we just kind of worked with groups and figured out along the way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us during that time trying to figure out kind of how to step up and where to be. And there was, a number of good funds set up that really helped around our community and helped through different organized, through United Way and others that really, I think, has gone back into the community. And who would have thought that we would have been, a year and a half later, right?
But I think it changed how we have to communicate and interact with employees. We started doing, I think it was every other week, calls. I would sit in my basement and do video conferences with the whole company. And then we started seeing people getting let go. And I remember I was getting ready to go to bed one night, and I just grabbed my iPhone and just made a video and said, all right, I'm going to give everyone, I can't remember what it was, I think $2,000 in the company. Everyone's got people. All I want to know is everyone email me and let me know what you're going to do with it. And I think we have over 2,000 employees now. We probably had 1,100 employees then. I got 1,000 emails, which is the most response I've ever gotten from anything. And it wasn't because I said, hey, you're getting $2,000. Everyone's getting that whether they reply or not. But I think it was, hey, you care enough about what's happening with me. And I got some of the most amazing messages. Hey, I'm going to help my sister-in-law who just lost their job, or I'm going to give it to my neighbor, or I'm going to help my husband got laid off and I'm going to help with this, or my wife, this happened. And it was really, I learned so much about the organization with a 30-second video. And people are struggling, companies having success. Don't wait till the end of the year for a bonus. Give some people some money to help people out. And it was absolutely fascinating to see all the different ways that people could help others out, knowing that we're pretty fortunate doing what we do.
Yeah, and I think that was there was so much going on at the time that I think that people really wanted to step up and help all and any of those that were impacted. There were a lot of different things that were impacting people during that time, right? You know, families where, you know, kids were coming home from school and colleges shutting down. And there was just a lot of things that really needed to be taken care of. And I think people really stepped up and supported each other, and organizations did also.
Well, the problem today is we're still in it.
Yeah.
And how do we work through we're fed up with this. I mean, is it going to end? And maybe it's not going to end until our kids' generation. I don't know, but how do we continue to exist in this world? We have the Omicron variant now, and new rules on travel, and it is we're going to continue to be in this challenged environment, and society is not reacting well. You see in the news, the news has changed. People are frustrated, acting out in ways that are just really sad. And so how do we better, if you look at mental illness, prescriptions for antipsychotics and for antidepressants are at record levels.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the unfortunate side of that in society. So somehow we've got to find a way to, whether it's employees or communities, find better ways to deal with the situation we're in, because it's not going to end.
I agree. I think that we went into a reaction mode, and we've spent time in reaction mode, but I don't think we've spent time in living with mode, right? How do we live with right now? And how do we make that work through a period of time? It's almost like we looked at it as before and after, and we skipped this period of figuring out how do we do the middle part, right? And I think I do think that's created a lot of frustration.
It also tests leaders, and one of our key tenets or skills that we look for in leaders is dealing with ambiguity. Well, we live in ambiguity now. Everything changes all the time. And, so what was it, be nice if everyone had those skills. You can't actually survive without those skills in your personal life, and now at work, where we make plans. Okay, in 2 months, we're going to go do this. Well, no, it's going to change in 2 months. So you actually have to be willing to really rethink and redo things in your life and your business in very short cycles.
Yeah, right. I think this may end up being our last question, just watching the time, but it's a great question. If you were a leader in today's climate, which you are, what is one thing you would change to break the mold of corporate work culture?
I think that there's nothing magical. I think if you treat people with respect, I think what always amazes me is how people fear titles, people fear roles, and I think the more you treat people, I mean, we're all the same here, and no one's better than anyone else. And if you just operate that way and try to do the right thing for your employees, hopefully you're operating that way in your personal life. If you do that at work, we are who we are, whether it's at home or work. People aren't different. So I think that if you just try to do the right thing for people and treat people the right way and with respect, and understand we all have good days and bad days, and just work through things versus the typical hierarchical command and control environment. And I think that you're going to be better for it. And so I don't know that there's There's no magical answer to any of this. It's just, you do more of the right thing, and I think people enjoy working with you.
I think that is an excellent closing answer. So I was going to go to another question, but I want to leave it here because I think that wraps up to me everything you talked about earlier about how the organization begun, your role in it, your role in bringing your people along and developing the culture you have. And underlying so much of that, I heard respect, respect, respect. Respect for the people who build the organization with you, respect for those that are patients, respect for those in the medical industry, respect for, I mean, you hit that. You didn't use that word all the way through, Tim, but in the way you spoke about
really good point. One of the most key things to me, and it's probably when you have disease and those things, people who come from a quote unquote different group, whether that's race or illness, respect is what you yearn for.
Right. Right. So I think that comes through in the way you speak of all of the topics we spoke about. I want to personally thank you for the path you've been on and what that's allowed you to do for our community and for all of those who are helped by the medicines that you do develop and that come out of your organization, for being willing to share your personal story years ago and then ongoing. It enables all the rest of us to tell our own personal stories, and just for what you do in our community every day. You guys do so much out there in our community. So personal thanks to you and your entire team there.
Well, thanks so much, Linda. This has been a real pleasure. I enjoyed spending the time, and thanks everyone for joining as well.
Great to have you today.